And now for our next breakout session, please welcome to the stage Dan Daldegan with Great Gray.
Hello. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Who's enjoying this event so far? You getting a lot out of this? Okay, good. I'm glad. My name's Dan Daldegan, and I'm a board member with Great Gray, who's co-sponsoring this. And I was invited to participate in this panel discussion with our esteemed panelists, who I'll introduce in a moment here, to talk about client service, which is a topic near and dear to my heart. First of all, I'd like you to meet Sean Kelly with Heffernan. Sean from Southern California. There you go. Round of applause for Sean.
Just for being there.
And Brett Mankowski from Chicago, where I am from. All right. So I'll do a little bio here so you know who we're talking to. I'll first give you a little bit on me. My name, again, Dan Daldegan. Everybody calls me Triple D. So if you hear that nickname tonight at the bar, you'll know what they're referring to.
And what tab to put it on.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right. Whose room to charge it to. I have spent my entire career in enterprise software. And I was the CEO of a couple software companies after a career at Oracle and Salesforce. And then I went into private equity. And I worked with Madison Dearborn, who was an investor in Great Gray. And that's how Rob and I started working together with the Great Gray team. And so leading up to this event and our relationship, our partnership with RPAG, Rob asked me to step up and talk about this topic that we think transcends industries. Because I'm a newcomer to the retirement space. And financial services generally have sold into this industry. But I'm not a practitioner like all of you. What I am a practitioner of is client service. And the definition of client service that I think is a way for us to transform from being transactional into being transformational. And we'll give you some substance to what that means and hopefully some takeaways, such that our goal for this session is you're going to have a different perspective on how to think about client service, how to challenge clients, which is not a verb we often use when we talk about client service, and how to move the dial on how all of us keep score on growth. So with that, we've got, and then you'll see now why we've asked Sean and Brett to join us. So I'm going to describe to you Sean's background. Sean is with Heffernan here in Southern California. I'm going to cheat a little bit here by reading some of Sean's bio because there's a lot here to share. Sean's a financial advisor and VP for Heffernan Financial Services, representing Heffernan in Southern California. Sean was named the 2024 Plan Advisor of the Year, and quite an accomplishment. Let's hear it for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Former gaucho from UC Santa Barbara. And so we're going to talk about some of Sean's experiences in that role. Brett is Brett Dankowski, over 20 years experience in this space. Brett represents One Digital, and he's with their retirement plan team, a National Strategy Council, and the Retirement Plan Advisor Group, RPAG. And I'm delighted to have Brett and Sean join us.
And I did not win 2024 Plan Advisor of the Year. Let's just get that out of the way. Or Sean's award. So.
Brett's from Chicago near me and was a college point guard at one of the schools nearby, near where one of my sons played ball. So we got a few things in common here. I'd like to start this conversation with a level setting of the definition of client service. Because when clients talk about a great experience, do they describe it as a sales experience? I don't think so. They describe it as a service experience. Yet all of us are used to talking about salesmanship and great selling and a great sales experience. But typically when there's a long-term, mutually lucrative relationship between a seller and a client, it's rooted in great customer service. And we're going to talk about what that entails and what it means and what does that look like and what are some of the attributes and what are the actions that great sellers take in delivering that kind of experience that results in a sustained multi-decade journey together. So let's start with you, Sean. I'd love to hear, how do you think about and then even differentiate yourself and Heffernan on the basis of how you service your clients?
Okay. So thank you. Thank you for asking us to be on the panel, and thank you, RPAG, for allowing us to participate. I appreciate it. Like you said, Dan, I think the Webster's definition of client service is just supporting your client, right? And that's very broad. So thinking about going way over and above, and providing that service to the client and not just being transactional or reactional, although I think that's very important. I think it's a very important part of how you support your clients and how quickly you get back to them. And as simple as that sounds, that actually means a lot, at least for the clients that I service. And by the way, I'm not going to tell anybody anything that you don't already know and that you're not already doing. I don't have the silver bullet. They asked me to be up here and share, so that's what I'm doing today. And when you think about after kind of having that, reaction time being short and getting back to them within the same day. I know that sounds simple, but within the same day, even if you get that 4 o'clock email, it really shows that you're committed to that client. Having that proactive and consultative approach, and I know those are two buzzwords in general, and I'll talk more about that in 1 second, but really creating that trust, because we are the experts. Like everybody in this room is an expert in our craft, in what we do, and that's what they're relying on us for. They're coming to us for that. So being able to be proactive and stay out in front of everything that's happening. So whether it's Secure Act 1.0 and 2.0, whether it's litigation that we see every single day, and helping our clients prepare for that, whether it's committee education, whether it's employee education, whether it's, true plan design consulting, right? Not just defining what like vesting means, but actually talking about it as a benefit that they can implement into their plan and, benefit their company or their organization from recruiting and retaining. So, as simple as it sounds, going over and above, everything that has to do with the 401k or 403b or whatever retirement plan that I touch, I consider my job. Even if it's a little teeny sliver, I consider it my job. And so I think maybe with that mentality, it's helped me provide, the service that I would expect from any service, whether I'm buying a cell phone or a car or whatever. I just provide that to the clients, and I'll talk about differentiate in a minute. Or do you?
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. I'd love to hear the same from you, Brett, and I'll add another wrinkle to it because Sean introduced an idea here. I think it's an important one, not just responsiveness, but prioritization. And there's been talk, and it's a pretty well followed practice to do tiering of clients, to set priorities for a service and sales organization. I'd love to hear your perspective on how do you do that in a way that differentiates you, but also doesn't deliver to the customer this feeling that there's an A and a B list.
Yeah, so first off, want to say super excited to be up here. So thank you for that. It's my 5th year attending the conference. And I was really excited when Nick D broke the threshold of using F-bombs. Because a lot of the content we're going to be sharing, you've heard a little bit before, so I kind of erased it and was going to fill it with as much expletives as possible. But then Luke did a good job of reminding me that Veronica has that stun gun. And definitely don't want that to happen again. So, but no.
Another sign you're from Chicago. We're very comfortable with profanity.
Yeah,
yes.
and getting tased. Yeah. So, it's I think in this model, kind of to take it back a little bit to answer the tiering question, what I've really found that the evolution of our industry has come from being very transactional on a client service perspective to being a cultural mix. Now, what the hell does that mean? Well, what we try to do on our team is really assimilate to the culture of the organization that we're servicing. I think that's really the next generation of servicing clients. And from an efficiency standpoint, tiering the service structure is absolutely appropriate. Again, earlier today, there were some great points on how to do that. We specifically kind of shifted, I would say probably about a year ago, rather than asset-based to really revenue in order to tier that model. And we do so accordingly based on the culture of the client, right? I know some of us in here have small market plans that we may meet with once a year and the client's completely fine with that. Well, if that's the case, as long as that culture is remaining intact with your perspective on dealing with them, take that as a win. So a tiered structure is essential, but it has to be done appropriate, right? I was talking to an advisor at another conference, and this individual, great dude, had 8 different service structures for his book, which, hey, if it works for him, great.
8
right?
different layers?
Yeah, 8
Wow,
different layers.
that's deep.
I can barely count to 8, so I'm like, I can't do that. But, our team, we kind of really shrunk that chain and developed moving from a 4 to a 3-tiered class. Mm-hmm. And again, based on revenue, again, utilizing technology, which we'll most likely get into from our prep sessions. We can talk about that, but super essential in this modern retirement plan servicing structure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about technology. The use of technology and automation tools, including Great Gray, we're investing heavily in Boarding Pass and continue to have very ambitious plans for that. And there are other tools that we're all using in our industry segment here to gain competitive advantage, to be more responsive to our customers. How's that playing a role in how you're serving your clients? You want to start, Sean?
Sure. Yeah. So obviously, technology is at the forefront of everything that we do. There's no better tool suite than RPAG's tool suite. It does a couple of things. One, it gives us the data and analysis and everything that we need to do our jobs well. But also, when we're able to present to the client what we need to present to the client, they can see it and understand it. And I think that's the most important part. I think the most difficult part of my job, at least, is educating clients. And when you can present that type of technology, the RPAG tool suite, for example, it's not a commercial, obviously, everybody here uses it. I think that talking about the tiering, you can still give that to everybody, right? And that's scale, right? So you can provide what looks like an institutional level report that $1 million plan wouldn't be getting to $1 million plan. And I think that's a huge part of what we do. We also do with one-on-one appointments, creating a process and a technology. So part of a differentiator, to go back to the first question, that we provide is just a lot of one-on-one financial coaching. And unless you have a process to that, it's difficult to scale that. And so technology in that regard too, having like an electronic calendar link that you could send out with an invitation where people can make an appointment, and then you see who's made the appointment, so you could pull the information ahead of time. They go through a risk tolerance questionnaire ahead of time, and everything's kind of automated to the extent that you can not only really understand what somebody needs help with, but also track it and file it and save it. So when you meet with them again and again, the technology that allows us to do that really makes a difference, not only in how we're servicing the client, but also how we're helping that human being who, their retirement plan is going to be the biggest part of their retirement. It's going to be the most money they have in one spot in most cases. So it's very important. And, technology is really helping us as it continues to evolve, be able to deliver that type of one-on-one service.
Yeah, that makes sense. How about from your point of view, Brett?
No, I think, Sean, you hit a lot of heads there. As technology advances, right, that we're able to capitalize on that and utilize those efficiencies and bring them down market, because that's what everybody wants, right? The $1 million plan, and I'm pretty sure this resonates with a lot of you, sometimes could be the most time consuming, right? We've all been there. It's always the case, right? So, one thing, that after listening to all the great content here today, try to be somewhat original. And I wanted to speak on technology that's been around for 3 years that I think at least I can do a hell of a lot better job of capitalizing on. And what has the pandemic taught us, right? That taught us we're moving into this virtual world with webinars, utilizing meetings virtually, right? It's not really going to go back. I think the uptick of face-to-face meetings started to come back a little bit, but I think, we're on the other end of the bell curve as far as how proficient that's going to be. So with that, again, getting back to the foundation and the specifics of just basically taking advantage of being on camera in front of people from either sales or retention perspective is very important. Yep. And it says a lot, especially in a sales format, right? I know a lot of salespeople in the room kind of hated that, right? To have to sell in a digital environment. You can't pick up on those little idiosyncrasies that you can connect on when you're watching a person's body language and so forth. So it's super essential to take advantage of that format, right? And you can do that. There's a million videos on where to place yourself on a camera and where you can buy a ring light so you have a nice, beautiful glow to show off your sexy attributes, right?
You have a makeup crew at home, if I recall right.
I do, yeah. But it's, those little things, having correct sound, go a long way. Have you ever joined a Zoom meeting or a Teams and everyone's not on camera and it's like playing Russian roulette? The first person that joins, you're like, oh, shit, I got to get on now, right? Yep. So what I'm asking to do is for you to challenge yourselves and be the first one on camera, right? And show your passion for this industry. It goes such a long way in not only sales presentations, but also relationship management and reinforcing that culture. Also, please don't put the camera low so it shines up your face and we can see your nostrils. Yeah. Because it's so weird that people do that, and it happens all the time. Or be too high and it looks like you're talking to Nick Delabadova, right? So you want to make sure that those little things go a long, long way in any kind of engagement that you have. So capitalize on it.
Yeah, it does. That's a very good point. And I think that digital hygiene that you're talking about, your background, you don't always have the option to not have it be blurred or have it be something that's, kind of a virtual background. But having a real background, it's made a big difference, I think, from like if I was to, and this doesn't have to do with client service, but I think it would extend to making the clients feel comfortable. But, if I go through all the different kind of sales presentations that I've done, and when I didn't have my own background that I set up versus having one, it shows your personality. So being virtual is tough to connect and relate as a human being to another human being. But if you have, Pearl Jam posters like Triple D does, behind his, you'll understand that he's a musician, or all the guitars that you have and all the different musical instruments. And that's just something that you can relate to another human being on. And I think it really just solidifies it.
No, it was fabulous. In our prep sessions, just seeing Dan and seeing the guitars and everything makes that instant connection, right? Now we're doing it because, we're preparing for this, wonderful panel, but just think about that in a sales situation. To make that connection, but it's really cool. So,
well, it's a reminder that in any industry, people buy from people. And if you double click on that, what it really means is people buy from people they trust and they like. And you can't trust or like somebody unless you get to know them. And you get to, like you're saying, Sean, some of those personal attributes of our interests, family life, et cetera. And it is interesting that we think of a face-to-face meeting now as a novelty. Like that stands out as an exception. When you can tell, I've been doing this for a few decades, and when I was young in my industry, in the software business, that was just the nature of what we did. We lived in our cars, we'd go visit every customer, every prospective customer, and now we have to rethink. You almost need to be a stage set designer in your home to create an environment when you're online and virtual that is going to be endearing and engaging for the people on the other line, so that you can be that one that is the first one to go on camera and compel everybody else to do it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So let's talk about a word I used in the introduction, to challenge our clients. And a definition of client service that has become popular, and through a lot of books. One of them is The Challenger Sale, written by Matt Dixon back in 08 and 09. And many companies have evolved out of that, sales training and consulting companies, teaching professionals across financial services, manufacturing, technology, et cetera, how to challenge customers with commercial insights. And in this world, it feels like it's particularly relevant as we look at the concept, which we've heard a lot of talk about, of work to wealth transition. How do you take that approach? How do you counsel, coach, if you will, and where need be, challenge your clients in a way that becomes a differentiator for you, so you really are showing up as a trusted advisor? Sean, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you. I think it's a good question. It's a loaded question. There's a lot of words in that question. I think that, and even back to, I don't know if Brett said or you said it, Dan, but, a client is a client, but you're interacting with human beings, right? So whether it's the day-to-day HR person or the investment committee with the CFO and the CEO, kind of really listening to them, doing a lot of listening first to understand what makes them tick, what makes them struggle, what makes them happy. Not just on the 401k side of things, but just in life. That has built an incredibly trusted relationship with all of my clients. And then that extends to that wealth, that workplace to wealth transition, because we're operating the same way with the participants. And, when we meet with participants one-on-one, we have the process that I described earlier, which is important to have a process because you can document it, you can track it, you can place value to it, you can show the client, hey, this is what we've done and here's the results. But also, again, this is the biggest amount of money that they're going to have in this retirement plan. And so treating that as important as it is, and not coming to the meeting with an agenda. So we never have an agenda. We just meet the employees where they're at to start building that trust. And most of the time it's they got to get out of credit card debt, or they need a budget, or something other than where do I invest my money. And by doing that and not selling and just listening and keeping track of it, and when we meet with them next year, bringing it up again. And I think another component is creating small wins. We don't have to give them, to use one of the business cliches, the ocean to boil. Just give them small wins. Tell them, hey, let's focus on paying this credit card off, and then we'll move to this one. And when you do that and you meet with them again, they feel, like they've accomplished something. They feel great and they want to share it with you. And then so how we handle the transition, to answer your question, is we have that trust. So a lot of times we're the first person they call in transitioning from workplace to wealth. Right. And if it's not when they're retiring, it's when their neighbor's retiring or their mother's retiring or something like that, just because we've built that trusted relationship of just having a conversation, trying to relate to them as human beings, and just trying to help them as like the first kind of order of business when we meet and talk to our clients.
That's great. What's your point?
Yeah,
on that,
no,
Brett?
absolutely agree with Sean. Just quickly, show of hands, how many teams out here are doing both retirement plan and private wealth or have a connection? So not many. No, Jesus, everybody. No, that's awesome. That's great. I mean, the things that Sean just said, completely we reinforce on our side too, on our team. I'm going to screw this stat up, but I want to say that like 80 to 90% of all benefits and decisions that individuals make have some direct correlation to their employee benefits package.
Yeah.
Right. So when our teams and your teams are going in and meeting with the C-suite, that's only a one-pronged approach, right? So we're making best interest decisions for everybody, and we're maintaining that. But what about that other prong and the stuff that Sean just mentioned? It's that constant engagement to make that transition seamless, right? Because you already have the credibility as a trusted advisor by their leaders, right? And showing up, getting those little wins, I love that, and really creating an ecosystem of positivity in the most exciting of topics, behavioral finance tactics, is something that it's really on our plates to handle for our people, and it's essential. And it is great to see so many hands in the air, because if you aren't doing that, somebody else is, and they're gonna get that foot in the door and get that client, and then then it could jeopardize your potential client. So very, very important to really capitalize on technology to do that, financial wellness programs and so forth, but essential.
Yeah. And to that point, so 90% comes from your workplace benefits plan. The other 10%, I'm going to steal a line from Joff White. I'm not sure if he's in the room, but the other 10% of the advice they get is from their brother-in-law at the Thanksgiving Day table once a year, which is terrible advice every time. It's never good. And so us being there, and it's a responsibility. I see it as a responsibility to help them and listen to them and, provide that. It's almost just like helping them get organized a lot of times, right? It's not necessarily, hey, 10% into the large cap, 5% into the small cap. Just getting financially organized so they can get organized, grow it, and protect it. And I think by building the trust like you talked about, that's what gets us.
So that means in the few weeks after every Thanksgiving, you're getting these crazy questions.
Crazy. Only crypto, stock, hot stock.
It's like a medical patient who goes on WebMD and then is telling their doctor what's wrong with them and what the prescription should be. Right?
That's right.
So let's pick up on a theme you each touched on, which is generational. So much is said about millennials and what's different about this generation. I feel like an expert in it because I'm raising 5 of them right now. My children age from 20 to 30 years old. And every generation is different. It looks through a different lens at their work life and what after work will look like, wealth to, what work to wealth. What are you finding different about this generation now that the leaders of the organizations we're working with represent? And then what are you anticipating as you look at that age group that my kids represent in their 20s and 30s now, of how we'll have to either think differently or meet them where they are, and thinking differently and acting responsibly in a productive way that's going to create wealth and give them security in retirement. Brett, what do you think of that?
So, I think, again, it's brought up a few times before, but we have the baby boomers who are retiring every day. They're gonna assimilate to a more face-to-face kind of boots on the ground format, right? When we start looking at the millennials and Gen Zers, it really is absolutely a different strategy in order to connect with them, right? With this age range, one of the big topics you're probably having is really just asset allocations and make sure their investment strategies match their goals, right? We don't want a 22-year-old in a fixed account or a GIC or anything like that, right? So it's connecting with that individual more in an interface utilizing technology is going to be most effective, right? But then kind of what Sean's doing on that older demographic that is going to ready to retire, that actually needs help with investable assets, which we all love, you kind of take a more direct approach and allocate a little bit more resources to doing that.
Sure.
That's the nature of what we're in, right? But I do see that Gen Zers, if you could get them to show up for work, that will eventually go towards a
or at least get on camera.
Yeah, exactly, right. I interviewed a young candidate not too long ago, and when I told them that they had to work on Fridays, they thought I was asking for like a kidney. And I couldn't believe that. And then I'm like, oh shit, am I getting old? And I'm like getting out of this game. Is it cool to work 4 days a week? And I'm like, so
Is that what the kids are doing these days?
yeah, right. What are they doing? But yeah, just kind of staying ahead of that and utilizing data from record keepers to do that, right? Financial wellness programs, boots on the ground, face to face for those older demographic getting ready to retire, and then taking advantage of technology to impact our younger team members.
Yeah, and thinking about it, too, I think that Gen Z and probably millennials, I'm seeing studies or articles all the time where they're more on track, right, than Xers and Boomers were as far as how much they have saved, right? So when they retire, they'll have an appropriate amount to replace the income that they need to replace, which is the whole objective. And I think that's very important because I don't think that Boomers are quite there because they kind of fell in the middle of having pensions and then not having pensions and nobody telling them what to do. Right. And so there's going to be, from my perspective, maybe a phase out of retirement. So it's not just like this mountain that you're climbing up and the last day of work is the richest day of your life because you've been adding to it and never pulling from it and making income. And then you're not and you're pulling from it to maybe, you get up there and you have this nice vista for a while, this plateau where maybe you cut down on your hours or you do something like Uber or whatever because it accomplishes a couple of things. One, you have income to sort of supplement, what you're giving up as far as retiring. But also, like when you go into work, at least for me, I see my friends, right? And I go to the water cooler and I talk to this person, and I go over here and I talk to this person, and you don't have that anymore when you retire. So I think that's a really important part of retiring and understanding that and providing the guidance and helping, that human connection not go away. And I think that just to quote on, or not to quote, but to talk about why millennials and Zers are more on track is because of the automation of everything, right? They were all automatically enrolled. It wasn't even a choice really that they had. It was just like, I got a job, now I'm contributing to my 401k, which is great. And I'm going to borrow something from George Fraser here. What you could do with the older generation is ask them what their goals are. Like, what do you want, right? And George tells this story, which is true. He sat down with a participant and said, hey, what would you love to do in retirement? She's like, I'd love to travel the world, but I can't. My husband didn't start contributing his 401k till he was 45, and I'm a teacher, so I don't have a lot saved. And he said, what if I could give you a way to say that you could take a trip to Paris every year, or whatever example he used? She said, yeah, tell me. He said, well, your husband or you could get a job at Delta 3 nights a week for 3 hours schlepping bags, right? Then you get 2 round-trip tickets anywhere in the world once per year. And if you get yourself a Marriott credit card, now you're earning points at the hotel. So little phase-out ways like that to supplement retirement and still be able to achieve this world travel that you wanted to do, even though you might not have the money, I think is very important.
That's a great playbook, and it's really insightful. Who'd you say, George?
George Fraser.
Told that story?
Yeah.
Love it. So let's expand on that. How often do you guys find yourselves in conversations where you really are stepping outside of traditional financial stewardship, and you're talking about lifestyle, and preparing for what a lot of folks my age, or getting close to already at retirement age, husband and wife look at each other like, oh hell, we're gonna be in the same room, in the same house together every day, all day? Like, you're not going to the airport, honey? Or don't you have something to go do? And being ill-prepared for that can be as tough as being ill-prepared financially. How often do you find yourself in guiding those kinds of conversations?
All the time.
Yeah.
Really, I think, another morbid fact, I think like 60% of people would rather plan their own funeral than their own financial, portfolio. And because it's a scary topic, right? So when you find yourselves in those situations, honestly, our wellness program and our engagement tools that we use, most of the conversations are around like budgeting and, what is an interest rate, or, things like that. So it happens quite often. So just having a playbook and resources that you can pull in order to take advantage of those situations, develop the trust, are really, really important. And but we see it all the time. Yeah. It's getting more holistic planning in those conversations than just what target date vintage should I be in? You know what I mean? So
yeah, and even specific to what you said, does your spouse even want you around?
Right.
You're messing up the flow.
Exactly. Because those patterns are established over many decades.
Yes.
Here's my domain, and your domain was wherever you go every day or every week.
100%.
Airplane, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. The idea of being a coach. That's another metaphor we'll introduce here. We talk about challenging our clients, the idea of being a coach, a great coach, and how many of us have ever had a coach in your life? Athletic, music, arts, drama, anything, right? If you're like me, you have a memory of your fondest memories of the coaches who inspired you the most and got the most out of you, are the ones who challenged you. And the metaphor was more like a personal trainer that when you're spending time with them and you're leading up to this, like, oh, this is going to be hard, but it's going to be good for me, and I need it. And if left to our own devices, we'd probably blow it off a lot more often than we should, right? And that's what great coaches, and I like the personal trainer model as a metaphor for being the challenger type of advocate in client relationships. What's been your experience with that, Sean?
Absolutely, yeah, it is. It's a coaching role. It's, I mean, as much of a financial psychologist as a financial advisor. And, I think that just listening to another person, and if you make someone feel heard, regardless of whether you're, giving them investment advice or talking to them at Starbucks, it's very powerful. Because who knows, maybe nobody's listening to them, right? And so I think that just by listening, they're going to give you, if you're truly listening, they're going to give you the solution to whatever equation you have in your mind about maybe how to bring on this client or how to service this client. Because you just, like you said, culture gets thrown around as just a word that, there's this culture, but there actually typically is an underlying culture, and understanding that by listening and giving it back, and making them feel heard, I think is very important. It's a very important way to do what you're asking.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. No, I mean, again, totally agree. It's just making sure that you're positioning yourself to be a resource for them, right? And assimilating to the culture, like we spoke on, is super important in that front. But it's really what people want and need. And we've all been there. The first 10 minutes of that sit down one-on-one, God knows what they say, right? So we almost have to have a psychology degree in order to get through it. But Sean mentioned it multiple times, just listening, and that answer will present itself, right? Because we're the experts on this behavioral finance tactics, right? They are not. You need to let that person open up and express themselves to you, so they can be a little bit vulnerable, and then you can help them out.
Yeah, it's like a recipe.
Yeah.
Like all recipes have different ingredients, right? More salt, less salt, cinnamon, whatever. Each person has a different ingredient list, right? And listening gets you there. And,
is that a cocktail or a meal we're preparing?
Both.
Okay,
it depends. But yeah, I mean, that's I think the most important part, because you actually hear what they want, and we have all of the resources, all of the tools, all of the expertise, all of the licenses, all of the designations right here, and we just pick and kind of answer and deliver what they need based on what they told us.
Right. So let's expand on that. How do you do that in a way? We talked earlier about giving commercial insights to our clients, and in doing so in a way that doesn't condescend. Like, you probably find yourselves in a single day going from a conversation where you're explaining how compounding interest works to a much more sophisticated conversation with a more sophisticated client. So how do you guys stay current on commercial insights and bring new insights to your clients in a way that they feel informed and it makes them feel smarter instead of intimidating them?
Yeah, we might have a video clip to show on that. Is there a video queued up for that? 1 minute? Speaking of compound interest. I don't know if we got a thumbs up or not because the lights are...
Gail, was that a yes?
To be on stage.
Yeah, we do.
I see it.
Let's take a look at it.
So this is how I do what he just asked. And hopefully you started so you don't have to watch the whole thing. But it's bringing it down to that level.
Hello, everybody. Sean Kelly, your 401k financial
the whole thing.
fiduciary advisor and farmer, coming to you again in person from San Juan Capistrano, California. I hope that everybody is safe and healthy.
It's only 2 minutes.
A couple weeks ago, I sent out a quick summary video of some recently passed provisions in the CARES Act, and I used our chickens and their eggs to demonstrate this. I thought I'd stick with that same theme today and talk to you a little bit about compound interest. Compound interest is earning interest on interest, and truly one of the biggest benefits to contributing to a retirement plan. Albert Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. For example, if you put $100 into your retirement account on January 1st and earned 5% return for that year, you had $105 on December 31st. Well, when the next year starts and you start earning interest, you earn interest on that entire $105, 100 of which you put in, but 5 of which was the interest you earned from the year before. So earning interest on interest. And a good way to demonstrate that is to talk about our chicken Pepper here. Pepper originally came from an egg just like this one. She hatched into a baby chick, grew up into a full-size chicken, and laid 3 eggs of her own. Well, just a couple of days ago, those 3 eggs hatched into 3 new, beautiful, cute baby chicks. Eventually, these chicks will grow up into full-size chickens and lay 3 eggs each of their own. And those eggs will hatch and we'll have 9 new chicks that will eventually grow up into full-size chickens, lay 3 eggs each of their own, and we'll have 27 new chicks. Guess what happens next? Those 27 new chicks grow up into full-size chickens, lay 3 eggs each of their own, and now we have 81 new chicks, and it goes on and on. Not only those 81 new chicks, but the 27 that hatch them, the 9 that hatch at 27, the 3 that hatched at 9, and Pepper, who hatched those 3 and started from an egg just like this one. Just like your initial retirement plan contribution. And that's the way compound interest works. It's exponential growth of earning interest on interest by continuing to contribute.
Now he's about to give up his mobile number, his home address, and everything else.
So
Is that your little girl?
yes.
I love it.
Yeah, one
That's
of the
great.
3.
How old was she when you did that video?
COVID, so I don't remember. It's all a blur.
Yeah.
All a blur.
It is kind of the time and space continuum collapsed on itself
Yeah.
during COVID, didn't it? Yes. That's great. That's a wonderful illustration of how to do that in a way that's going to land well with a client and make them feel smart and informed instead of intimidating them. Because I can't think of a category other than maybe particle physics where you can engage somebody and make them feel dumb immediately by throwing out words and acronyms they don't know the definition of, and they're embarrassed to say, well, what does that mean? Slow down, right? So they just don't ask and they walk away uninformed. So in the time you got left, let's give you, each of you will bat cleanup here. There's a fat pitch right down the middle of the plate. Take a big swing at it, hit the ball hard. What thoughts would you like to leave the audience with on an actionable changes that we can make in the way that we think about and act with our clients to deliver great service to sustain long, profitable relationships? Right, you want to start?
Yeah. So I think one of the big takeaways is really make that list of all your clients, right? And then make an honest assessment of who you have a great cultural connection with and who any of us could call and they would say you're doing a hell of a job. I think that's a critical takeaway. We try to do that in our practice at least, once a quarter, semi-annually, to really give that honest assessment. And all the ones that might have a question mark, send those to Sean and I, and we'll no. But really have some reflection on that. And the ones that might not be, have those question marks, maybe up your game a little bit in engagement or connectivity in any format that you see fit.
Yeah, making that list and updating it often, right? If you have 5 clients that really love you, what are you doing for them? And just start doing it, for the other clients that you have. I think that list is very important. And just remember, we started off talking about virtual, wrapping that back around. It's difficult to connect on a human level with virtual. And so trying to find ways, and just to highlight listening again, I think is very important for all of us as professionals, as masters of our craft. And, really the only resource that 90% of America, or whatever the stat is, has for financial advice and really life advice, financial coaching. So making a list, trying to somehow scale it if possible, and trying to connect on a human level.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Everybody, Brad Dankowski, Sean Kelly, let's hear it for them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.